Welcome to Manhwa Mantra. Before we jump into today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for regular updates. And hey, your thoughts matter. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. If you haven't watched the previous episode yet, no worries, the link is in the description. Watch that first so you're fully caught up and then come back here. All right, without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. Theo stared at the dragon's heart, a realization dawning on him. This wasn't just a source of power. It was a place where a mana hall could be formed. Having it there would allow mana to flow through him with an efficiency unheard of. Normally, warriors like those in the Ragnar clan would give anything for a dragon's heart, as it promised overwhelming power, but no human had ever overcome the limitations of using one. Until now. Theo marveled at the incredible power the quest rewards had given him. But the weight of his new reality hit him hard. It wasn't just about the power. It was about Evelyn. Evelyn, a high-ranking swordswoman, had retired from active duty after losing her left arm. She now managed the training grounds with the same unyielding discipline that once made her the commander of the white, armored dragon cavalry. Even the demon dragon of the cavalry had respected her skill. Evelyn was a woman of principles, known for her fierce sense of justice, her disdain for dishonesty, and her refusal to judge based on status or strength. Theo remembered vividly how, during his rigid and arrogant past, she had stripped him of his position as her direct subordinate. And now, if she discovered his mana hall, his dragon heart, there would be no forgiveness. She'd execute him without hesitation. He felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple as he considered his options. Could she really go through with it? And more importantly, could he avoid being caught? Then a thought struck him. He knew Evelyn's strict personality well. Perhaps he could use it against her. Drawing a deep breath, he spoke, his voice steady despite the nervous energy buzzing in his chest. He told her he too was an heir of Ragnar. If anyone were to hear of her spreading false rumors, it would be seen as defiling the Ragnar family name. Evelyn's sharp gaze narrowed as she listened, but she nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. Theo pressed on, asking her if she knew the punishment for humiliating a member of the Ragnar family. Execution, she replied flatly. Theo smiled faintly. Good, he said, then you understand. Go ahead and check. Evelyn's eyes narrowed further, puzzled by his sudden boldness. This wasn't the timid Theo she remembered. Still, her principles demanded action. She insisted that she had sensed a mana wave and would verify it. As mana glimmered in her hand, she apologized in advance, saying that even for a Ragnar, rules were rules, and there were no exceptions. Her mana flared as she scanned his abdomen, searching for a mana hall. Seconds passed. Her expression shifted from confidence to confusion, then disbelief. There was nothing. No mana hall. Evelyn stepped back, her voice barely a whisper. It's not there. Theo's calm gaze met hers. Did you feel it or not? He asked, his tone steady, almost mocking. Evelyn's face paled. Without hesitation, she dropped to her knees, her voice trembling. She begged Theo to execute her, offering her life to atone for her mistake. Theo stared down at her, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Of course, she wouldn't find a mana hall. After all, what he possessed was far beyond the ordinary, a dragon's heart. It wasn't just a source of power. It was a key to controlling mana freely and concealing it entirely. As Evelyn knelt before him, Theo thought to himself how fortunate it was that humans wouldn't even begin to imagine the possibility of possessing dragon hearts for years to come. She could never have suspected such a thing. Theo placed a hand on Evelyn's shoulder, his voice calm and reassuring. He told her there was no need to worry and commended her for her principles. It wasn't often, he said, that someone was willing to risk their life to uphold the truth, even against an heir of Ragnar. Quietly, he acknowledged to himself that having someone as strong and principled as Evelyn indebted to him could prove advantageous in the future. The reason the opening of mana halls was forbidden before the awakening ceremony was to prevent mana overflow, a dangerous condition. That Evelyn had been so concerned, even for someone like him, a bastard of the Ragnar family, strangely warmed him. He thanked her for taking care of him after he passed out and left her standing there, stunned and trying to process what had just happened. As Theo walked away, he reflected on the power now at his disposal. with the dragon heart and the magic he retained from his past life. He knew he would become absurdly powerful very soon. A few days later, Randon's loud voice echoed across the training grounds. He barked at Theo, telling him to swing more to the right. His tone filled with frustration. "How many times do I have to explain something so simple?" Randon shouted. Theo, however, hardly cared. Pretending to be weak was his strategy, even though he was steadily growing stronger. Still, Randon's antics were beginning to grate on his nerves. Theo's eyes narrowed as he glared at his instructor, realizing that Randon was deliberately teaching him poor techniques to make him look foolish. The thought gnawed at him. Someone had to be orchestrating this. Theo felt certain that Randon's behavior was connected to the mastermind behind his death in his previous life. He just needed to figure out who it was. An idea formed in Theo's mind, and he called out to Randon. The instructor, clearly annoyed, barked back, reminding him that speaking during lessons was against the rules. Theo ignored him, his voice sharp and cutting. "I can't listen to this trash anymore," he said. With deliberate force, he snapped his training sword in half and glared at Randon. How did someone with such third-rate skills even become a mid-rank swordsman? He demanded. His tone was scornful as he accused Randon of being a plant, sent to monitor him and mocked his abilities, saying he would likely struggle against even low-ranked demonic beasts. Randon's face turned red with anger. "What did you just say?" he growled, stepping forward. Theo smirked and walked closer, his voice mocking. "Your skills are trash," he said, "and I'm going to force you to resign as my instructor." Randon's rage boiled over, but beneath the anger, he realized the situation could spiral out of his control. If it did, he'd have no choice but to contact the mastermind behind Theo's torment. Meanwhile, in a place called the Camellia Palace, a man burst into a dimly lit room, his voice frantic. "Axion, have you heard? That bastard of Ragnar is going to duel his master next week." Axion sat lazily in a chair, a drink in hand, his expression unreadable. The man continued, speculating excitedly that Theo might end up half-crippled after the duel. Before he could say more, Axion hurled his glass with pinpoint accuracy, the impact knocking the man unconscious. The room fell silent as Axion, known as the Dark Tiger of the Four Hounds of the North, spoke coldly. "It doesn't matter if some bastard ends up crippled." Beside him sat another figure, Remington Narcio, the silver lion of the same group. Unlike Axion, he remained silent, his expression stoic, as the tension in the room lingered. Another man entered the room, his voice steady but firm. "It should matter," he said, his gaze fixed on Axion. "If we let our guard down, things could go wrong." This was Ed Troyven, one of the 9 dragons and known throughout the land as the Sky Dragon. His reputation alone was enough to silence most rooms, but Axion barely acknowledged him. Leaning back in his chair, Axion dismissed his uncle's concerns. "We only need to worry about people with talent," he said with a smirk, his confidence unshaken. Ed frowned. "Even the smallest spark can ignite a blaze with Ragnar," he warned. But Axion was unfazed. "Their instructor will handle the situation," he said, his tone making it clear he didn't intend to give the matter further thought. 1 week later, at the training grounds, the duel between Theo and Randon was about to begin. The atmosphere buzzed with energy as trainees laughed and chatted, many of them skeptical about Theo's chances. To them, this was just another entertaining spectacle. Evelyn, however, watched from the sidelines with a worried expression. She could sense there was more to this than a simple match. Theo stood in the center of the training ground, his blade raised. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. This wasn't what he had planned. Originally, he just wanted to humiliate Randon and get him fired. But now things had spiraled far beyond that. The large crowd only added to the pressure, their cheers echoing around him. Still, Theo calmed his mind. He was determined to get his revenge on Randon, even if the situation had escalated. For a moment, he felt a burning urge to strike Randon down, his past life's memories fueling the intensity. But he knew better. His current skills weren't enough to ensure victory. First, he needed more information about Randon and his motives. Randon, on the other hand, was starting to panic. If Theo got fired like this, it would mean failure for his mission. Desperate, he tried to appeal to reason, telling Theo that this duel went against the rules and could lead to him facing a tribunal. Just as the tension reached its peak, a status window appeared before Theo, informing him of a tutorial quest, fight and win against Rondon. Before Theo could react, Evelyn spoke up. She had a solution. Smiling knowingly, she suggested they resolve the matter the Ragnar way. Theo glanced at her, unsure of what she meant. She explained the rule of the strong. Her voice carried authority as she elaborated. A sword match could settle everything, she said, with no need for tribunals or further disputes. The victor's will would be final. Rondon burst out laughing, clearly pleased with the idea. To him, this was perfect. He was confident he could crush Theo and put an end to this farce once and for all. Evelyn proposed that the match take place in 1 week, giving both sides time to prepare. Turning to Theo, she asked with a teasing smile if that timeline suited him. Theo hesitated for a moment. He knew he wasn't ready, but he also knew he couldn't back down. With feigned confidence, he agreed, though internally. He braced himself for the challenges ahead. The week passed quickly. When the day of the duel arrived, the training grounds were packed with spectators. The trainees were buzzing with gossip, their conversations punctuated by laughter and skepticism. One trainee shook his head, scoffing. "They say Theo can barely swing his sword properly," he muttered. His friend raised an eyebrow. "That's hard to believe," he replied. "I mean, he's still a Ragnar." The first trainee snorted. "If he were just a regular Ragnar, I wouldn't even comment," he said. "But since he's an heir to the bloodline, there's no way he'll lose to someone like Rondon." As Theo and Rondon faced each other, the crowd fell silent. Rondon, smirking, gave Theo one last chance to back out.